Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created with Phaser 3. Previously, we worked on adding in our new attack manager and our attacks and the animations that are tied to them to our game. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. Alright, so now that we added in our attack animations and we've updated our battle scene to use them, the last remaining item for our battle scene polish is going to be some scene transitions. So currently, we've updated our battle scene to go ahead and do a nice fade out effect once the scene actually ends. And so this works for when we want to transition to another scene. However, when our scene first starts, it just immediately starts right away, and it's kind of it's a little bit jarring. And what's really cool about some of like the Pokemon games is they have these really cool intro animations that'll play when the battle starts. And so, in addition to doing fade effects, you can also use mask to go ahead and create some really cool camera transitions. And with those masks, it allows you to do things like fade in, but then apply like an image to go ahead and do that. So there's a lot of games these days that'll do that when they transition between areas or levels. And so what we'll go ahead and do for our scenes, we'll go ahead and try to create a nice transition where we have like two black bars that open up into our scene. Alright, so to go ahead and do this, let's go ahead and make a new file, and we're going to put all of our custom scene transition logic inside this file. So under our utils folder, let's make a new utility file, and we're going to go ahead and call this scene transition.js. Then inside here, let's export out a function, and we're going to call this create scene transition. And so for our function, let's fix our name. So for our function, the first thing we're going to need for one of our params is going to be the phaser scene that we want to add the transition to. And then we're going to go ahead and provide some options that can be provided, and we'll make them optional. And so for our options, the first one's going to be a callback. So if we want to be notified when this transition is finished before we go and do something, we can allow a callback to be provided. And the other piece will be if we want to tie this into our skipping battle animations, we can tie that as well. And so let's go ahead and just add in our types real quick so we can define those. So we know we have our phaser scene. And then for options, we'll go ahead and make this optional. And we will say this is an object. And then what we'll do is let's copy this. And we'll paste it twice. And so we will have our options dot callback. And we'll have our options dot skip scene transition. And so this is going to be a Boolean. And this will be a function that returns nothing. And what we'll do is for our scene transition, we're going to add a default value of false. All right, so the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to check to see if our skip scene transition was provided. So let's add a new variable. We're going to call this skip scene transition, and we are going to set that equal to our options if it was provided. So we'll add the question mark, then we'll do dot, and we'll do skip scene transition. So if options is not provided or skip transition so if our skip scene transition is provided, we'll use that value. Otherwise, if options is not provided or if it's provided without this property, we will default to false. And then what we'll do is if skip scene transition is set to true, we are going to check to see if we have a callback provided. So we'll check our options if we have a callback, and if so, let's go ahead and do our options callback. And then we will go ahead and return early from our function, and we won't need to do anything else. So with this function, basically with our camera, since we've not done anything to it, we go ahead and return early, and we will have the same effect that we currently have now. And that would be where the scene will go ahead and start, and we'll start having our state machine work right away. And so because nothing gets changed, what we can do is let's jump over to our battle scene, and we're going to go ahead and hook into this and update our flow to call our new function. And so to do that, we need to go into our intro battle state. So if we can come up here, let's go up to our intro. And then what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and replace our delayed call with this new function. So let's go ahead and call our create scene transition. And we'll go ahead and pass in this for our phaser scene. And then we need to provide in our configuration. And so for our configuration, we'll do skip scene transition. And we're going to do skip battle animations. And we will do our callback. And what we'll do is inside our callback, this is where we'll go ahead and update our state to go ahead and be our pre-battle info. And then what we can do is let's get rid of this logic here. We'll go ahead and save. We'll come back to our scene transition. And so we'll just make sure everything works. We're going to go ahead and do our options.callback just to make sure everything's still connected. All right, so to go ahead and create our camera transition, what we actually need to do is we need to go ahead and create a mask. And if you're not familiar, a mask is essentially a clipping path, which can be used to mask pixels and make them either fully visible or fully invisible without actually changing our alpha, our opacity on our game objects. And so in Phaser 3, the framework, you can apply masks to your camera, and what that'll do is allow you to define an area that is visible or not visible, depending on what you select. And you can also do this to game objects as well, but for this, we'll just be doing it to our camera. And so a really good example of this is this Spelunky level type transition here. So basically the whole level here, this will be our camera, our main camera, and basically this circle here, this is a shape that's being defined as our mask, and we're updating it. But if you imagine, if we just had this circle here on our screen, basically everything inside that circle is being set to be visible, and that is our mask itself, this circle here, and we're just kind of animating it to create this very nice transition effect. And so what's really cool with Phaser is you can do this with images, you can do this with some of your game objects, and there's many options on how you can go ahead and create that mask and apply it. All right, so to go ahead and do this, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to use a geometry mask for our game. And basically what a geometry mask allows you to do is you can create a phaser geometry object, so some of the basics like a rectangle, and then we can go ahead and apply that to our camera as a mask. So for us to go ahead and do this, what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and create, like I said, we're kind of like this two rectangles like sliding and opening effect. And so to go ahead and do that, we need to go ahead and get a reference to our width and height of our scene. Then that way we can have our rectangle take the full width of our scene and we can position it based on our height. So we can go ahead and grab our width and our height from our scene scale object. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and make our rectangle shape. So we're going to do const, and let's go ahead and scroll up. We'll do shape. Our rectangle shape will be equal to a new phaser geometry. And we will do rectangle. And so what this allows us to do is we can create a very basic rectangle shape using the Canvas API. And this is just an abstraction for that. And so for this, we provide our X and Y. We want our rectangle to go ahead and start in the top left corner, and then our width and height of where we want the rectangle to go to. So we'll go ahead and do 0. And for our height, we want to be in the middle of our screen. So we're going to do our height divided by 2. And then for our width, we want the full width. And for our height, we'll want this to be at 0. So then that when we add our mask, the whole scene will be black. And so then with our shape, what we can do is now we can use the phaser scene graphics to go ahead and fill in our rectangle. So what we'll do is we'll do const, we'll do G, and we'll go ahead and create a graphics instance. We'll do our scene, we're going to do add, and we're going to do graphics. And then what this allows us to do is we can call some of our utility methods. And so we'll do fill rectangle shape. And so with our shape, we just provide our rectangle shape that we defined. And what we're going to do is we're going to call set depth. And we'll come back to this in a minute of why we're doing that. But for the time being, we're just going to go ahead and do that here. All right, and so now that we have our shape, we can use our graphics to go ahead and create our geometry mask. And so to do that, we're going to do const mask is going to be equal to our graphics game object, and we can do create geometry mask. And what this is going to do, it's going to use any of the shapes we've defined on that graphics game object to make that mask. This is where if you define your own custom paths, and so if you use lines, you can do all kinds of different shapes, and this will allow you to create some really cool mask by using the graphics here. And then finally, after we have our geometry mask, what we can do is we can set that mask on our camera. So to do that, we do our scenes, we do our cameras, and we're going to do our main camera, and we're going to do set mask, and we'll go ahead and do mask. So now if we go ahead and save, what's going to happen is our whole scene should be black. And so what's happening here is we've created our rectangle shape, but because it has no height, our mask is not showing anything. And so to test this, what we can do is we bump up our height to be 50. What will be happen now is we've created a rectangle that has 50 pixels in height. And so this is our rectangle. And when we apply that as our mask, that becomes the visible area for our camera. And so if we just play around with this a little bit, this is how we can control how much is shown in our scene based on this mask here. All right, and to see what's happening here, what we're going to do is let's comment out where we set our mask on our camera. And what we'll do is let's bump this up to be 100 pixels. Go ahead and save. And so what's happening is we're creating our rectangle game object on our scene graphics game object. And we cannot see it in our scene. And the reason for that is we're calling the set depth method. And what this does, this is going to set the depth or your rendering layer of where objects will be drawn onto your canvas in the order they're going to be drawn in. So typically for your game objects, if you don't provide this value, they're all set to 1 and they're all on the same depth. And so kind of like your Z. And what will happen is when you don't set this and they're all on the same layer, then phasers are going to draw them in the order that we tell Phaser to create these game objects. And so typically we don't have to set this. As long as we create our game objects in the right order, they'll be a position where we want them to be. However, sometimes if you want certain things to always be drawn on top of other ones or below, you would use this method to do that. And so what happens here is if we remove it, we change our depth to 1, and this makes our rectangle visible. And so up until this point, we've created a game object and we can see it, and we've not done anything with it. And where the magic happens is when we call the set mask method on our camera, that's going to apply that game object to be our geometry mask. However, one of the unique things about the mask is they need to be created and rendered below anything else that's going to be shown in that mask. And so then that's why we are setting the depth of our mask to be -1. So then that way, this is the first thing that Phaser draws to our canvas. And then anything else that's drawn on top of it will now allow it to be visible inside our mask. And if we do not do that, what will happen is because all of our other game objects are drawn before we call this scene transition, it prevents them from being shown. Another way we could do this is if we wanted to update our battle scene to create our scene transition at the top of our create method and then store our reference, we could do it that way as well. But a good workaround for that is if we just set it to -1, this tells Phaser, it tells the engine to go ahead and, hey, please draw this game object first and foremost, since it's negative and it's higher, since it's lower in the depth. All right, so now that we've talked about the mask, we've seen how it actually works, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to change this back to 0. All right, and so because our mask is just another Phaser game object, we can go ahead and modify the properties on this game object to allow us to create animations. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add a tween to go ahead and update our rectangle size and our positioning, so then that way we get that nice scene open effect that we're looking for. And so to go ahead and do this, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add a tween. So let's do our scene, we'll do tweens, we'll do add, And so for our tween, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add our onUpdate property. And so inside here, we're going to provide a callback. And so inside our callback, what we need to do is we need to do our graphics game object. We're going to call the clear method. And then we're going to go ahead and call fill rectangle shape. And we'll provide our rectangle shape. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to fill out the rest of our properties, and we'll come back and walk through this. So after our onUpdate, let's do our delay. We'll do 400 milliseconds. Duration, let's do 800 milliseconds. Our height, and this will be an object. So we're going to do an ease. We'll do our phaser, math, easing, expo, and this will be in out. And we'll do from 0, start 0 to height. Then after our height, let's go ahead and update our Y property. And we are just going to copy this so we don't have to type it all out. And so we'll do the same ease function. We'll go from, we're going to do height divided by 2. Start will also be the same. And we're going to go to 0. All right, and then let's go ahead and provide our targets. And so for our targets, this is going to be our rectangle shape game object. And let's add the onComplete listener. And when this happens, we'll do a callback. And in our callback, what we'll do is we're going to remove our mask. And we're going to do that by destroying that game object. And we will clear our mask from our camera. So we'll do our scene, our cameras, .main, .clear mask. And then finally, we're just going to check to see if our callback was provided, and if one was, we will call it. So let's go ahead and remove this here, and let's go ahead and save. All right, so if we go ahead and come over to our scene, if we go ahead and refresh, we should see right away when our scene starts, we get this really nice transition where these two black bars open up and we see our game. And so what's happening here to create that functionality, we'll go ahead and skip on update. We'll come back to that. And so delay and duration we're familiar with. We've used on those other tweens. So we're using the height and Y as our two properties that we're targeting with this tween. So what that means is every update to this tween, our height and our Y values are going to change. And since we're targeting our rectangle shape, what that's allowing us to do is it's allowing us to go ahead and update the Y position of where that rectangle's at, and it's allowing us to go ahead and increase its size. So if we go ahead and let's comment out these two lines of code and comment out this line of code. And so let's go ahead and test that without it being a mask. So if we go ahead and save, we should now see the inverse where we start with nothing. And now we have this rectangle kind of grow and move up our screen. And it goes ahead and fills up the whole screen. So this is what we're doing in our tween, is we're taking that rectangle, we're increasing its size, and then we're moving it up. So then that way it fills up the whole screen. And then by applying that as our mask, we get the inverse where we can actually see our scene now. Let's go ahead and reset those properties. We'll go ahead and save. And then, so what we do then is once that tween animation is complete, we go ahead and destroy our game objects. We destroy our geometry mask. And this to clear up our camera, we call clear mask as well. So then that way our camera's back to normal. We've not done anything else to it. And then we call our callback if one was provided. And so what we're doing is on our onUpdate method, what we're doing is we're calling the clear method. And what this is going to do is going to reset the basically any style changes that have been done to our graphics game object. And so the graphics game objects are a really nice wrapper for your basic Canvas API. And typically what will happen is with your Canvas API, anytime you want to modify how you're drawing to the canvas, you need to set your fonts and your styling manually, and then you want to clear it every time between you create your objects. Otherwise, it's going to keep the same styles as before, and so we're just clearing all that out. And then finally, because we're clearing, we need to redraw our rectangle shape. So now we're redrawing the rectangle that we want to update on our scene, because initially when we created our graphics, we called fill rectangle, so that's just going to fill at one time based on the size. And so on our update, we need to go ahead and call it again, so then that way it's going to draw the new rectangle with the new dimensions. Otherwise, our canvas game object would not be updated appropriately. All right, so the last thing we're going to test is we're just going to make sure our animation skip is working appropriately. So if we come to our config, let's go ahead and set this to true. What should happen is our scene should start. We shouldn't see our animation, and we should be able to go ahead and start our battle. And if we go ahead and revert that back to false, we now see our nice animation. All right, with that actually brings this video to an end. So now that we've wrapped up our battle scene polish with our new scene transition, it's time for us to actually transition over to our world scene. And so this is where we're going to go ahead and create our world, and our player will be able to interact with it. So we'll create our player character, be able to move around. We'll have NPCs they can interact with. We'll add in the grassy areas. We'll be able to encounter our monsters, and so much more. So as a reminder, there is a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see some links on your screen now.